In this tutorial you will learn how you can tan a person, and let's pretend that our model here just came back from summer vacation and that she has this nice kind of golden or bronze tan. And the method will look now very familiar to you because it's similar to what we just did with the teeth. So we kind of think, okay, like the skin that also has this kind of gloss, or there are some highlights in the skin, and there's also a shadow or like a darker area to the skin. So we will pretty much use a similar technique how we whiten the teeth, and now we will just go ahead and darken the skin. So first of all, we need a solid color for that, and we go down this menu here into this circle or this cookie or whatever that's called, into this little button, and we go into our solid color. And here you want to search now for a kind of orange or brownish color, but it shouldn't be too dark or too saturated, something more maybe down here. So if you stay pretty much in the middle, then it doesn't get too saturated, because here it would get a bit darker. If you look over here, the preview, so here it's darker, here it's a bit brighter and less saturated, here it obviously gets even brighter, and here it gets darker. So let us choose maybe a color like this, and this will now affect the skin tone in the highlights. And if I just press OK, now we have this overall color on our image, and we want that our image shines a bit through, and for that we just take again a different blending mode, and we will go here into color burn. And now this is obviously too crazy. We have to lift off the shadows and the highlights again, because it's now, color burn, as you would think. That's what it kind of also means. It burns the color into the skin. It's too red and overall obviously not very nice. But if we just go in here with a double click once more into our layer style, then we can lift this effect off. And here you just have to play around. It kind of depends now a bit on your image, if you want to play in here with your with this layer or with the underlying layer. And I'm just going ahead and see, okay, I want to get this slider off again. So I press onto all the option, and this will separate this triangle, and then I will see how far I have to go so that this looks overall a little bit more natural. And I would probably drag it over all the way. So I think this looks now very nice, kind of this bronze color. And then I can also see what it does if I just lift this off a little bit of the white tone as well. So maybe a bit more like that. And let me see what the underlying layer does. So that will also lift the color a bit from the background. But you see, if I go too much, then the image gets a bit flat. So let me see, I would probably go about here maybe. And if we do the opposite thing with the other slider, now I think then we just get too many artifacts. I would probably not touch this slider, and maybe also bring this a little bit in. And if we see our preview button here, the before, the after, I think that lifted the shadow or this area quite well. So we see a little bit more skin again. It's not too red. It has this nice bronze tone, and obviously it's too extreme. So I would also lower this down, because this kind of tan or bronze color we only want in the highlights of the skin pretty much, so that it looks natural. Maybe something like this. If you're not happy with the tone at any time, you could also just play around with it a little bit more. You can just see maybe different color tones might be more natural. You can also drag this thing here up. If you want to go more into the red, then you just go down, something maybe like this, and then I just press OK. And if I go before and after, I think that looks already pretty natural. But kind of like this idea was to pretty much only define the highlights in the skin. So now I want to bring in another solid color, and this time I will say, okay, I just want to also darken the shadow areas in the skin a little bit. And for that I would go in this cookie here again into my solid color, and I will pick another one, this time maybe a little bit darker, maybe still in the red, maybe something like this. And for here I will change now the blending mode into multiply, and now you see that this yeah, kind of lays over the whole image, and especially that it makes the whole image a little bit more matte, so to speak. And again, we want to fix this obviously with our layer style. And once more, I just bring this palette over here, and this time we want to get rid of our highlight area so that this effect is more in the shadow. So let me start with this slider. If I press it, Alt and Option onto this triangle, then this will be split again, and then I will just lift this off this way, and then I will also do the other way around, lifting it off this way. Okay, I think this is quite nice. Let me see if I also bring this in a bit and this a little bit even further. No, I think then I might lose the effect overall. So under the underlying layer, what does this do? Maybe that's also good, and we can also mask this way off. So I think this looks now pretty natural. So if we just go into our preview here, before where it was kind of dark all over, and now we kind of just layered this off. And if I go onto OK and go before and after, yeah, now I think just this highlight area and the shadow area is just a little bit darker. So obviously I can always go in and say, actually this looks now too bright, that you imagined maybe that it's overall a little bit darker. If you want to have more of this bronze color, then you can always just play here with those sliders, and you can just lift it or lower it depending on the style that you imagine here. So I think maybe something like this would also work. Before, after, yeah, I think this looks quite nice. So I think anytime, if you have a few different adjustments, it will just makes the overall look a little bit more believable, because nobody has just one colored skin. You will have highlights and lowlights, so to speak, and therefore I think it makes sense here to play with different colors and also with different blending modes. So this looks already pretty nice. And now you can also say, okay, if you ever thought that the skin became then too red or too yellow, then I really like to play here with my selective color. And if you don't quite know what the skin tone is made of, there's maybe one other trick I can show you before as well. If you go into your hue and saturation, you can always press onto this little hand symbol here, and then you can just pick the color, and now the hue saturation will tell you, okay, Photoshop thinks this is red. So if you just click around, there's no other tone here than red. So this is a fairly easy fix then. If you go into your selective color, now you know, okay, the most change will happen now in the reds. And here you can say, okay, I want this maybe a little bit more this way. If you want to change the red into a little bit more yellow, or here if you would go all the way, then it obviously gets green. We don't want that. We want that it looks kind of bronze tone like, where obviously the bronze tone has always a little bit of red in it. But we don't want that it's too, it shouldn't look too burnt either. And here we can change the yellow even more. Yeah, if you go here, then it just gets blue. It's weird. So I would probably just up the yellow a little bit, maybe something like this. And with the black slider, you can always say, okay, should the skin be overall a little bit brighter if you lower the black down, or do you want to darken it even more? Then you can also do this here with the black slider. So here I would say maybe about 5 would look quite nice as well. So if we just close this back inside again, and then if I just, drag my adjustments up here so they're not in the way, and if I just group this now all together, and okay, now it's back into a group, before and after. So I think that looks very realistic. And now obviously you can also think, okay, with black it's obviously no big deal if the color is also on the background. I don't think that's too dramatic here. But if you think, yeah, maybe it looks even better if I just paint it onto the person, then you can also just go onto your group, and with Alt or Option you bring into this mask again. And now you can even say, okay, so if you maybe even know the person, then you could say, yeah, Phoebe, she normally tans less in the face and more on her body. So then you could make it even more realistic. Obviously, if you met this model for the first time, you wouldn't know, but you can just play here now with different opacities. So if I just press B for brush, white foreground color to paint this effect back in, and maybe just with a 50% opacity, then you can go in like this. And you could also say, now okay, now I paint it obviously over the whole face. I can make it even a bit more realistic if obviously this paint is not necessarily in her eyes. So I could just with zero, then I have 100% here, then I could just paint this back out again. Oops. Obviously with black as my foreground color, otherwise nothing happens. And this is probably now too extreme. Maybe we just go back a few steps. Maybe I use 50% to paint the eyes back in, because otherwise if her face is so dark and then her eyes are this crazy bright, then it also looks a little weird. Maybe we mask this off her lips, something like that. And then we could say, okay, 50% maybe on her face and then maybe 60% on her body. So now just switch the color around again. Soft hardness obviously, and then I could just kind of paint the effect on, because sometimes it's also a bit more natural if maybe certain body parts just don't get so tan. So most people, they are just a bit more tan on the arms, for example, and then you can just brush this in partially. And then if you just go in with a very small opacity, you could even start maybe with 30, and then you can just brush a few times over areas where you think, okay, here it would be a bit more tan, for example, and here maybe also. But obviously don't go too crazy over one part, because that's kind of why we use the frequency separation, because then we even out body tones again. So you kind of want that it looks natural, but without that it's too real, because you still want to have this equal body colorization overall. So if we go now before after, I think this looks really natural. And now you can just decide if I went too crazy here over the arm or the neck, because the neck would probably also not have that much of a tan, because it's normally a bit more in the shadow because of your face position. So this would be probably a bit lighter, this might be a bit darker. But this is how you can also walk your way through the image, or you can just leave it on as an overall effect. But I think it's the best way how you can bring some tan into somebody's skin. So just make sure that you work with different colors. You can even apply more colors here, of course. You could have even darker colors or brighter colors. So play around with that and have fun to be the tanning doctor.